You go on vacation again?
I won't say anything. They do. All set?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the zoning board of the Township of Franklin has been provided. And would you call the roll?
Cheryl Bethia? Here. Richard Buchanan? Here. Joe Reese? Here. Alan Rich? Here. Gary Rosenthal? Here. Robert Shepard? Here. Wasim Verdas? Here. Elizabeth Clarkin? Roz Khan? Here. And Chairman Thomas?
Yes, here. I want to make a brief announcement that I have received a letter of a resignation from Elizabeth Clarkin. He has some family issues that are interfering with performing on the board, so that will be a spot that's open. Moving on to minutes, regular meeting, May 19th, 2022. Would take a motion.
I move to accept.
I'll second.
Give me 1 second. Cheryl Bethia?
Yes.
Richard Buchanan? Yes. Joe Reese? Yes. Alan Rich?
I wasn't there. This is for,
This is for the 5/19/22? Okay,
For
yes.
the minute.
Gary Rosenthal?
Yes.
Robert Shepard? Yes. And Chairman Thomas?
Yes, regular meeting, June 2nd, 2022. We need a motion.
Move to accept.
I'll second.
Cheryl Bethia?
Yes.
Richard Buchanan? Yes. Joe Reese? Yes. Alan Rich?
yes,
Gary Rosenthal?
Yes.
Robert Shepard?
yes,
Roz Khan?
Yes.
And Chairman Thomas?
Yes. Regular meeting, June 16th, 2022. Again, a motion.
to accept. Joel, you can't vote. So Joel, Rich Buchanan can vote. Can't vote. So we need somebody else to.
I'll move it.
Second.
Barry? Cheryl Bethia?
Yes.
Alan Rich?
yes,
Gary Rosenthal?
Yes.
Robert Shepard?
yes,
Wasim Verdas?
Yes.
Faraz Khan,
Yes.
and Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Resolution 1784, Capital Holdings, ZBA 22-00009.
So on this, Richard Burkanic and Robert Shepherd cannot vote on this.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
There's Gary and Cheryl, is that right?
Yes.
Those are the voices I heard. Cheryl Bethia,
Yes.
Joe Reese,
Yes.
Alan Rich,
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal,
Yes.
Tim Verdas,
Yes.
Faraz Khan,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Okay, discussion, part of the agenda, Rutgers Community Christian Church, ZBA 16-00024, an extension of time, and who do we have representing? Or do we just get a letter, or
We typically have somebody come to represent.
anyone here at Rutgers Church? We'll come back to it and see if anything changes. We have a public comment section listed on the agenda. The zoning board does not have a public comment section. Each hearing has a public comment portion of the hearing. There is no open public comment. First hearing, Mohammed Raymond and Tamina Habib, ZBA 22-00005, variance, C variance in which the applicant installed an enlarged driveway, walkway, and patio without permits, 52 Winding Way, Princeton, Block 11.09, Lot 8, in the Zone R10A. This is being carried until September 15th, 2022, and no further notification needed. If you were here for that, it's not going to be heard until September 15th. Before I announce the St. Charbel Maronite Church, we have a couple board members who need to certify.
Yeah, and some of you may have submitted your certification to Christine, but I haven't had a chance to confirm with her. So Rich Prokanic, Alan Rich, and Cheryl Bethia, did you have a chance to review the video for this hearing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, she has my certification.
All right, so I think they can participate and vote on this matter.
Okay, we got that out of the way. St. Charbel Maronite Church, ZBA 20-00027, is a D3 conditional use variance, preliminary final site plan with a variance in which the applicant proposes demolishing the existing church and daycare, as well as 4 of the single-family homes on the site, and constructing a new, and this was changed, I believe it's a 28,000 square foot, 21,000 square foot place of worship at 526 Easton Avenue, Somerset, Block 261, lots 1 to 6, and in the OP Office Professional R7 zone, carried from July 7th. No further notification needed, and you're on. And I guess you're representing here for Mr. Smith?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board professionals. My name is Tim Arch. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of New Jersey. I'm here filling in for Bob. He sends his regards, and he would have liked to have been here, but unfortunately you have me instead. If it gives me any points, I am a Franklin Township resident, so I can boast that where Bob can't. So we're here tonight to do the second half of the St. Charbel hearing, or I guess end of the St. Charbel hearing. I do have 3 witnesses tonight. 2 of them are really just updates. They're previously testified witnesses, and then we have one final witness. So I would like to begin by calling Mr. Mark Remo, who's our engineer, up so that he can give some.
Okay, just as a preliminary, he didn't, I'm sure, explain, this is kind of a expedited hearing because it was a matter of cleaning up a lot of loose ends, and
Correct.
And there's really, I think he said, 1 new witness probably, or whatever.
Correct. 3 witnesses in total, technically. However, as you'll see, I believe Mr. Remo and Mr. Campbell will be quite expeditious.
Okay. You're on. And he's already been qualified, so.
Yes,
Yes.
You didn't lose your license.
I haven't
between
lost my
then.
license, knock on wood. So anyway, I'll keep it short. Basically, one of the requirements of the last meeting that we would get together with the township engineer and the township planner and go over the review comments. So we did that on actually July 12th, I guess it was, and we agreed to address all the comments in all the letters to the satisfactory approval of both the planner and the township engineer.
All those little items are done, finished, taken care of, and will be complied
Will
with,
be,
just to
yes.
summarize. Okay. And I hope that's it for you.
Unless you have any questions.
Nothing against you. Any board questions? Okay.
My next witness will be Mr. Michael Campbell for a startlingly similar line of testimony. Mr. Campbell, you were sworn in last time, and
Yes,
your credentials have...
that's correct, yes. But the same meeting that Mark Remo just spoke of, I was simply asked to add to my architectural drawings what was already on his engineering drawings. So the seating calculations and how that relates to parking was added to my drawings, and we graphically showed the average grade in the back of the building and the height of the building, which is 39.2 feet. So I did that, I added that to the drawings, I circulated them to everybody, and they were approved. And I was just asked to bring them here as an exhibit, bring hard copies of the drawings that I had sent to them with the requested information.
Ask if you have those hard copies, if we could mark those. I apologize, Chairman, I don't know what exhibit number we're at, since it's a continuation.
Probably don't either, since Reagan's not here. This, just to refresh my memory, part of this was just cleaning up the idea that there was a height variance, but it was only valid as a variance from Easton Avenue because of the grade change.
Right.
And when you get to the other side, it's not a variance, and that needed to be spelled out differently or put on the drawings differently, which is basically what you were certifying.
Got to use the mic. Sir, make sure that you have to use the mic.
We didn't change anything or alter anything from the last meeting, we just showed it graphically on our architectural drawings,
Okay.
just to clarify.
Which is, I believe, what the request of professionals was, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Board questions?
So as far as marking the exhibits, if we don't, I guess we're at the disadvantage, we don't have Frank and Christine, but yeah, maybe update one or something like that, could they mark it?
We don't know at all what exhibit they left off on last time.
And they put today's date and then...
Can I just call it Exhibit 1B and Exhibit 1, or Exhibit 2B, because we...
I mean, I don't think the exhibit list was astronomical, so I think we can figure it out for the record, so I think we can mark it whatever the
Okay.
attorney thinks we should mark it.
If we label this with today's date, it should stand out from the rest.
Right.
Okay. Great, thank you.
No, he's
We'll get that correction of 8-4. We can certainly mark that at the end to comply with the evidence. While we're waiting, no other questions of Mr. Campbell from the board?
I might be a little slow, but when I watched the tape, I wasn't here last time, but I watched the tape, and the EV charging stations, now, are they going to be put in? Did you say you were going to put them in?
You need a mic, you need a mic.
That would probably be a question that Mr. Reed...
Okay. See,
He's still here, too.
and I am a little slow, sorry for that.
I can confirm we are putting in 2 charging stations.
You are? Okay.
Anything?
You started talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. You've got to,
Just if you could just mark it as A1 with today's date. I imagine that the ones from the last application were A1, A2. Let's just do it
Yeah,
with
and I
today's
think
date, just to
they-
be safe.
I think they went up to A7, but I'm not sure last time. So I put today's date on each of these sheets, and there's 3 sheets, so I'll just put A1, A2, A3.
Great, thank you.
okay, no further questions. Next witness.
I think he's,
I'm sorry.
I think he wants to, put on the record these exhibits, and as the chairman stated correctly, there were 2 things. One was the calculation of the building height, because if you recall, the comment that I had was, I couldn't confirm that the information that they had put on their plans as far as their calculated height was correct, and I also couldn't confirm the parking calcs. And not to steal your thunder, but, we had the meeting, and the information that they provided with some updates or clarifications to the architectural plans was that the variances that were identified on the site plans and in my report were indeed correct. So I'd suggested that they, put those, clarifications in the form of, it's been a long week, I can't talk. Put it in the form of an exhibit, and if the board approves the application, they would obviously have to incorporate that into their plans that they submit for compliance.
Okay. Next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Our next witness would be Beth McManus. That's our professional planner.
Okay, you haven't been sworn in yet, right?
I don't believe so, yeah.
Okay, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Just give us the benefit of your credentials and testified as a planner.
Sure. So first, I'm a licensed planner. I hold my NJPP. I'm also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've been working in New Jersey land use since 2001. I spent a lot of time representing municipalities, but I do quite a bit of private work as well, such as this evening. I've testified in a number of places. Before I list some of those, I also want to note that I also have a undergraduate degree from Rutgers in environmental policy, graduate degree in city and regional planning. But those places I have testified include municipalities such as, but not limited to, Raritan Township in Herndon County, Ewing, Piscataway, New Brunswick, Alexandria Township, Clinton Township.
I think we're fine with that.
And I do want to note also that I think Franklin Township was the first place I ever testified when I was just like a very young planner. I helped Habitat for Humanity. So it's nice to be back. I can't remember if it was this board, it might have been the planning board, but it's nice to see things come full circle.
Expert opinion.
Sure. So this application, I think, before I launch into the variances, for which there are quite a few, honestly, the first thing I want to say is I think this application will be able to bring a number of benefits to the community. So first and foremost, what we're doing is we're eliminating a deteriorated building and a deteriorated site, and we're going to be replacing that with a new, modern, better-looking, better-functioning house of worship and site. And as part of doing that, not only are we proposing to build this nicer-looking building that will have a better presence along Easton Avenue as well as in the neighborhood, we're also going to be updating the landscaping to improve the appearance of the site from that perspective. And also, importantly, we're going to be able to provide more parking for this church. And that, I think, is a really important positive impact from this application. So yes, one of the things that you're going to hear is we actually need an impervious surface variance. But it is really because we're taking the efforts to try to provide more parking for the members of this church, and as a result, reducing the impact on the neighborhood. And the other benefit that goes along with the building, but is, I think, a little less typical for redevelopment proposals, is we're going to be improving the backside of this building. So I think, obviously, we're going to have a nicer face along Easton Avenue, but one of the things that I also like about this application is the other streets, the residences along those other streets, or just motorists going down the street, along Blake, for example, and Reeve, is that they're actually going to have a better view of the back of this church. So yes, we'll have some landscaping that will screen that view, but the building itself will be nicer looking than what exists today along all 4 road frontages. But in order to do that, like I said, we need a number of variances. And in fact, we need 8 conditional use variances and then 1 regular C variance, if you will. But by virtue of this being a conditional use, that means that this use, the house of worship use, is fundamentally permitted in our zone districts, and that's the R7 and then the professional office district. So I'm not here requesting a D1 or maybe a D2 variance for a use that's prohibited in the district. Instead, this is permitted, but with conditions, 8 of which I'm going to run through and tell you why we don't meet them, but why I still think that it's okay. And so those 8 variances I'll list very quickly, and then I'll go through each one specifically. So first, I think as everybody is aware, we notwithstanding our increase in parking, we actually need a parking variance. We're providing 96 versus the 374 that are required. We also need relief for the parking location, to have the parking, the majority of which is between the building and the road frontages. We need a variance for the parking setbacks of about 5 feet, as low as 5 feet, whereas 15 or 25 feet, depending on the landscaping, is required. We also need relief from the front yard setbacks, which are 50 feet along all road frontages, and you'll hear that we don't meet that along 3 of them. We need a building height variance. It's a conditional use variance, but it would also have been just a little bit over what would have been necessary for a C variance, so we're at 39.2 feet compared to 35 feet. We need that impervious cover variance that I listed, lot cover variance, just a little bit, de minimis, and then lastly, of course, is buffer. And so your planner's report on this application really laid out the required proofs that I need to testify and that all of you need to consider. And it's, I think it can be summarized as first demonstrating that the site remains suitable for the use despite the deviations from the conditional use requirements. And also, and that's the positive criteria. For the negative criteria, we have to demonstrate that all of these deviations would not result in a damage to the character of the surrounding area, such that we would be creating a substantial detriment to the public good, or to the zone plan, of course. And then, as part of that, we need to demonstrate that we're not creating a substantial detriment to the purpose of the zone plan. And then lastly, we need to demonstrate that the granting of the variances would outweigh any detriment created by them. And so the way I'm planning my testimony is I'm going to address the positive criteria for each of these variances, and then I'll come back and I'll address the negative criteria, particularly in regard to the detriment, any detriment that may be done to the zone plan as a result of the application. So the first thing I'd like to address is that minimum parking variance. Like I said before, it's a 96-space proposal compared to 374 that are required. The first thing I want to highlight is the fact that the township zoning ordinance requires sort of a doubling of the parking, at least from our perspective. So we are required to have parking for the seats as well as for the sanctuary. And so essentially what that requires is that we have a parking requirement that's generated for the same group of people occupying the church, but at 2 different times. And so what's more typical, and what I think that we've been able to meet, is providing parking spaces for the demand generated based upon the seats of the worshipers at the service. And in part, not in part, but one of the other points that I see that I think is relevant is the fact that our traffic report done by Lee Klein reviewed the demand from the church, reviewed the from the seats and from the church layout, as well as with the parking availability that we're proposing. And what he concluded is that our parking is adequate for the site. And in fact, he found that we would really only need around 75 parking spaces. But in addition to that, one of the other things that I think is important is that the existing parking lot, which has 39 parking spaces, 39 striped parking spaces, that provides parking at about 1.1 space per 5.6 people. But our proposal now is for about 1 space per 3 people. So while we do have this significant deviation, we are providing more parking through this proposal on a per capita basis, if you will, compared to what exists today. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is some of the information that we heard from our architect during the last hearing, where he cited that it is rare for churches to exceed 70% capacity, further supporting our reduced parking, and further that our seat count should really be based upon 24 inches as opposed to 22 inches when measuring the width of the pew and trying to determine how many seats each carries. And so for these reasons, I think that our parking is adequate on the property. Yes, we are proposing more parking per capita than what exists, but more importantly, I think the parking that we are proposing is going to satisfy the demand generated by this church. Also related to parking is the parking location. So the township ordinance requires that the majority of the parking be located to the rear of the main structure, with no more than 10% of the total parking located at the front entrance for special needs, handicap access, etc. Unfortunately, that is a requirement that I think is just about literally impossible for us to meet. As you may recall, our site is the majority of a full block, and so we literally have 4 road frontages. We cannot design the site without having parking within the front yard, and more specifically, the majority of the parking within the front yard. Also in regard to parking, we have a setback variance of, we're looking for as little as 5 feet compared to 15 or 25 feet, depending on the buffer. And so this variance and some of the others that you'll hear about are really an effort to try to maximize the parking that we can have on the property. One of the major concerns that we have for this site, and I think the neighbors may rightfully have as well, is just simply the impact of vehicles that simply can't fit in the existing parking lot or seeking on-street parking. And so we've really sought to maximize the number of spaces that we can put on this property. But while we've done that, we've also done our best to keep in mind the visual impact of that parking and the parking being closer to the street than normally required. And so we've done our best to try to mitigate that visual impact. We've done so with shrubs as well as street trees on the property. And so while I can't tell you that you're not going to see the parking, I can tell you that the site is, 1, going to have a nicer appearance than it does today, but 2, it's also going to have the screen, the sort of filtered buffer along the front yards that will screen the headlights and just simply screen the view of the car so that the landscaping is more prominent than the parked vehicles on the site for those residents that live across the street or perhaps those folks using the streets. We also have a setback for the front yard setback. So it's 50 feet along all streets, but along Reeve Street, we are proposing 21.5 feet. I want to note that that's a very minor increase than what exists today at 21 feet. We also have a variance along Easton Avenue. We are proposing 13.54 feet, and that's about a 4-foot difference to the 17.6 feet that exists. And then lastly, we have a variance for Franklin Boulevard, and that again is 50 feet. We are proposing 19.17 feet, whereas 48 feet exist. And while this is not the sole reason for the variances, I do want to remind folks that one of the reasons why we're struggling with the setbacks is because we are proposing 2 right-of-way dedications. It's 5 feet along Easton Avenue and 8 feet along Franklin Boulevard. And so that contributes to our inability to place this building at a 50-foot setback for all of the streets. But also, I want to note that the building setback is is not inconsistent with what we see for the surrounding area. So viewing, for example, across Easton Avenue as well as across Reeve Street, I see a front yard setback of about 20 to 30 feet. And so along this most prominent frontage, our proposed building is not inconsistent with the prevailing setbacks. The other thing I want to note in regard to the setback is the most active part of the building, the portion of the building which has the greatest activity and impact on the neighbors is actually towards the rear of the property, and that, of course, is not subject to the setback variance. We also have a buffer variance. It's, again, 5 feet or 15 feet based on the landscaping that is proposed. And so similar to what I said with the parking setbacks, again, much of our site design is an effort to maximize the available parking on the site so that we can reduce the impact. And this is evidence of that as well, the reduced buffering. But as I said before, with the parking setback, we've done our best to mitigate that with the plantings that we can place in this area. And so we've added shrubs as well as trees to try to improve the view and give landscaping be a more dominant in landscape, or dominant in a person's view as compared to the parked cars. Next, we need that building height variance. So again, we are proposing 39.2 feet compared to 35 feet that's required, or maximum of 35 feet. So we have a deviation of just 4.2 feet. And as we started to hear from our architect this evening, and we heard more from him at our last hearing, the reason why we need this variance really is about the grade of the property. And so what we see is a slope towards Easton Avenue that really creates the need for the variance. We have about a 20-foot difference between the southwest corner, which is at an elevation of 54 feet, compared to our Easton Avenue entrance, which is at about 34 feet of grade. And so if we think about that 20-foot grade difference and compare that to the 4.2-foot height deviation that we're seeking, I think that provides some evidence of our efforts to try to mitigate this height, to try to bring it down to a height that is, one, has a desirable appearance, and I think that we've achieved that with our architecture, but also to try to keep it in scale with buildings to the best of our ability. And one of the things that we also heard from our architect is about the roof slope proposed, which contributes to the need for the variance as well. He provided testimony that this slope is going to be more aesthetically appealing as opposed to a roof slope that's has a lesser slope or perhaps even a flat roof, which would presumably have the ability to comply with the height requirement. Our next variance is impervious cover. We are proposing 72.2 feet, and that can be compared to 45 feet in the OP district or 60% in the R7 district. And so, like I said, with the parking setback, with the buffer, our impervious cover variance has a direct relationship with our efforts to maximize parking on the property. Our impervious cover is, I don't have the breakdown, but I would say it's obvious from the site plan that the vast majority is due to the surface parking as opposed to the proposed building. And so while we're proposing to maximize our parking to the extent possible, we've again tried to mitigate the relief needed for this particular variance for the impervious cover by updating the stormwater management, proposing to comply with stormwater management rules, and as a result of that, we're going to be able to actually reduce the environmental impact by being able to provide proper treatment of stormwater across this property. And in addition to updating the stormwater management system on the site, we're also proposing those plantings I've cited a number of times, both within the periphery of the parking lot and also within the parking lot, to try to mitigate the visual impact from that increased impervious cover. And then our last conditional use variance is for the lot cover, and this, I would argue, is just a de minimis variance. We are proposing 20.5% compared to the 20% maximum required in the zone. And this 0.05%, I think, will have a de minimis impact on the mass and the appearance of the building.
Now, you keep saying that it's lot cover. Do you mean building coverage on the lot?
Yes, I'm sorry. There's impervious cover and
then there's
then building cover.
Building coverage,
Yes.
right. And so that the building coverage is supposed to be 20 and you've got 20.5?
Yes, sorry
Okay.
about that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and so then our last variance is about the parking aisles. The township ordinance requires a 26-foot width. We are proposing 24 feet. This is not a conditional use, this is just a typical C2, flexible C variance. And so there are two purposes of the municipal land use law that I think support this variance. The first one is Purpose A, and that is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use of or development of all lands in the state in a manner which promotes the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Also, Purpose H, which is to encourage the location and design of transportation routes which will promote the free flow of traffic while discouraging location of such facilities and routes which result in congestion or blight. And I cited these two purposes of the MLUL because our parking aisle deviation, those 2 feet, again, really is an effort to maximize parking on the property. We really want to reduce the impact to this neighborhood as much as possible and provide it for as many of our parishioners on this site as possible. And so by doing so, what that does also is it helps to advance the operation of the house of worship by providing adequate parking for its parishioners, and that's why I've cited advancing the general welfare in Purpose A. But in addition to that, as we increase our parking availability on the property, that specifically is contributing to Purpose H, which is to promote the free flow of traffic. And so by doing so, we'll be able to place more cars on the site rather than on neighboring streets. And the last thing I wanted to note is that 24 feet really is typical for municipal ordinances and very common in commercial parking areas. And so I think it's very unlikely that we're going to have visitors to the property that are unable to navigate in the 24-foot drive aisles. And so that's the positive criteria for our 9 variances, but I want to address the negative criteria. And I'll start with substantial detriment to the character of the area or on the public good. I don't see any substantial detriment to the public good through this application. As I said at the outset, some of the things that we're doing is we're replacing a tired and deteriorated site and also site improvements like that parking lot with new and modern site improvements and new and modern and better looking building. And so in addition to that, we're also advancing, or we're also providing as much parking as we can to get those parishioners off the site. And so as part of that, our application seeks to mitigate those impacts from the increased cover, for example, through the improved building, but also through the landscaping. We're providing additional shrubs and trees on the property to just generally improve the appearance of the site, but also to provide that screening to the parking that I talked about a number of times. We also have no significant traffic impact. We've heard from our traffic engineer at the previous hearing that this application will result in less than 100 cars per day as a traffic increase. And we've also proposed to close the access to Blake Avenue, except during events. And I think that, too, is going to be a significant reduction in impact to those residents along Blake, just simply not to have cars exiting the property with headlights in towards their homes, and as well as the traffic on Blake that would result. We also know that the parking can be met with the 96 parking spaces on the site. We heard that again from Mr. Klein during his traffic testimony. And then lastly, one of the other benefits to this application is we're also going to be reducing the activity on the property. We've heard that the closing of the daycare will be a reduction in activities as well as traffic, particularly during peak times. And so for all those reasons, I don't see any substantial detriment that would result in this application. I think it's actually a benefit to the surrounding area. And then in terms of the zone plan, there are a couple of goals that I'd like to cite that I think are supportive of our application. The first one states to encourage commercial and industrial development in areas with access to major regional highways and in established areas, and that's from your 2016 Master Plan re-exam. It further goes on to locate major employment and traffic drawing uses in areas where they will least impact residential neighborhoods. I've cited this goal because while we're not a commercial use, we are a non-residential use, and we do have significant draws in terms of traffic, particularly during our services. And so when I look at this location, what I see is a site along Easton Avenue that is also oriented towards Easton Avenue as opposed to the residential streets that surround the site. And that will give access to some of the larger regional transportation network in the area, including but not limited to Route 287, which is cited in this master plan goal as well. There's another master plan goal to support the redevelopment of declining areas within the township. And so this is certainly not an area of the township. We are a single property. I still think that we are supported by this master plan goal because, again, we're taking this tired, this deteriorated site, and we're going to be replacing it with one with a building, with landscaping, and with parking that's going to be updated. It's going to be nicer looking. And as I've said multiple times now, I really do think it's going to be a benefit to the community and a benefit to the surrounding area. So for all of these reasons, I think the benefits of this application, both in terms of the conditional uses, conditional use variances, those 8 variances, plus with the 1 C variance, I think that the benefits of this application clearly outweigh any detriments from the various deviations that we've requested. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the board or from my attorney.
Anything from the board? I just want to reaffirm for my own benefit, two of the variances, the side yard variances, Franklin Boulevard and Easton Avenue, are exacerbated by the requirement for you to dedicate property to the township or the county.
That is correct. We are donating 5 feet along Easton Avenue and 8 feet along Franklin Boulevard.
Right, and then the rear yard setback is not a variance, and you're reaffirming that that's where the majority of the activity takes place.
Yes, that's correct. We do not require a setback variance to Blake Avenue, and that is the side of the building that will host the greatest activity, since that's the side of the building where the parking lot is located.
Okay, any questions?
2 questions, Mr. Chairman. So do you have an opinion on the appearance of the building and whether it represents an improvement over the existing condition? And then the second part of that is, if you do have an opinion, does that help to mitigate the variances and which ones?
I do. Yes, I do think that the building is going to be a nicer looking building, and so the proposed building will be an improvement for the appearance of the site generally, but more specifically, it's going to mitigate the front yard variance along all 3, Easton, Reeve, as well as Franklin Boulevard. It's also going to mitigate the building height variance as well. And I think it also mitigates the building cover variance, although that's just a de minimis variance. Having a building with quality architecture whose building mass and height has been appropriately designed, dealt with, broken down so that it doesn't appear too tall or too massive. I think all of that contributes to mitigating the impact of the variances.
Okay, thank you. And then just one thing, just to remind the board, you had the presentation of the architecturals at the last meeting. There is that building height variance of 39.2, but if you recall, it was really only that one portion of the one side that came to a peak. The architect explained why, from an architectural perspective, why he would rather have that design rather than having a lesser, and I think the planner spoke to this, but a lesser sloped roof would take away from the appearance of the building. And the architecturals that were presented to you, the vast majority of the building is 30 feet or less in height. It's just that one peak that faces Easton Avenue that goes taller for those architectural reasons.
Okay, any other questions? Your testimony is complete. All right, we will open to the public for questions and/or comments concerning the application. Anybody wants to say anything, come up to the mic, please, and name, address, and swear you.
Ma'am, you have to speak very close to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Shanique Davis, Shenique, Davis, 227 Blake Avenue. We're really excited.
I'm sorry.
Wait 1 moment.
We just have to swear you in. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, thank you. We're really excited about the redevelopment and expansion of the church. I just had a question in regard to the setbacks. Will the decreased setback on Franklin Boulevard affect our sight line to turn onto Franklin Boulevard, knowing that there have been a number of fatal accidents in that area?
I think that would be perhaps you may want to have your folks ready for questions. So I think that'd be a question for the site engineer.
Yeah, Mark, if you can come up.
You might want to.
No, you can stay up here. You get to wait until he's done answering, because you may have another question after he speaks.
Okay.
So Mark, can you address the question as to the sight line?
Yeah, we did a site distance analysis for all of the access points from the site onto the existing roads, and it's part of the set of plans, and there was no issues with site distance. Based on the
Sight lines, there's no difference in the sight line?
There's no obstructions. In other words, you're talking about coming out of Blake Avenue?
Yeah, so being able to turn in that area from Franklin Boulevard to Oakland, we have a number of fatal accidents. Some folks trying to turn onto Eastern Avenue and then also just turning onto Franklin Boulevard and people walking across the street. So just wanting to ask the question, if us being able to see to turn left or right, would that be affected by the decreased setback?
No. Not at all. We did an analysis, and it does not affect the sight distance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to clarify, so the distances that were spoken of, the 13 and that's from the front property line, but then the actual curb is another 10 feet or more from that front property line. So, rough, I mean, from one street it's 13.5, the distance may be 25 feet or so to the actual curb, and even higher from the other. So it's.
Just as an aside, one thing you might be interested in, supposedly in September, Somerset County and the Township are starting a Easton Avenue study to improve safety issues. Specifically, that's one area specifically that is targeted, so you may want to keep abreast of that. Hopefully it's going to improve what your concerns are, not make them worse, all right?
Thanks for that info.
Anyone else? Okay, then we'll close to the public. Anything you would like to tell us?
I would just like to say thank you for your attention. I think Ms. McManus has essentially summed it up better than I ever could, so I would just hope that you look favorably on this application, and thank you for your time.
Okay, personally, I think she did a pretty terrific job explaining 9 variances. I'm not sure I remember application. Put a number to it like that, it doesn't sound good, but when you hear the story behind it, it's a different picture, particularly from my point of view. Any board comments or motion? Anyone, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve St. Charbel Maronite Church, ZBA 200027, with all the conditional variances which were specified by the planner. Did an excellent job, by the way. Abolishing of the existing church and no longer use of the daycare facility, as well as the 4 of the single-family homes on the site. Constructing a new 35,699 square feet place of worship, 526 Eastern Avenue, in Block 261, Lot 16, in Zone OP and R7.
I would like to add one condition to that, if I could.
Sure.
The fellowship, I know it was discussed before at the other meeting, but the fellowship hall and the worship area not both be used at the same time for parking. Okay.
That's
That
fine.
was in there, I'm sure, I just want to make sure.
That's fine.
I second the motion.
Well, before, you probably should adjust the square footage. You said it was 21. Okay. That has been,
Yeah, and the applicant made a number of stipulations and I'll say promises to the board on the record at the last hearing, as well as in writing to one of my reports as to the operation. So I'd recommend that be incorporated into any resolution.
And shouldn't we also add that they'll comply with all of the points raised in the engineering report?
It should be all staff reports, I think was there.
Yeah.
Agree to comply with all staff reports.
Okay,
To the township satisfaction.
okay.
now we'll take a second.
Now,
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay, and I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Okay, Cheryl Bethia?
Yes.
Richard Prokanic? Yes. Bill Reese?
Yes.
Alan Rich?
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal?
Yes.
Robert Shepherd?
Yes.
And Chairman Thomas?
Yes, I think it really will be a vast improvement in the corner and to the neighbors. So good luck with it. Any further business?
Second.
Anybody object? Meeting adjourned.